CBS Sports asks itself who's going to be the next first-time head coach that will win a national championship. Well, they've got a list, and Michigan's Sherrone Moore is on it. What's more, ESPN has projected the 2025 college football playoff. And even though Michigan is not winning the championship, you are going to like what they are saying. We'll talk about all of that here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Voice weirdly just got a push in the right direction in the middle of the open. Still dealing with that. But anyway, let's talk about first CBS Sports Chip Patterson, who is part of the Cover 3 podcast, I believe. He's got an article out on CBS Sports. Who will be the next coach to win first national title? Steve Sarkisian, James Franklin among the names at the forefront. So we're going to tie all these things together as to what what CBS Sports says, what ESPN says. I got to say that Michigan's getting a lot of love right now, and I think it makes sense. We'll get into some of the stats and some of that stuff too, because the national nightmare is over and the browser is no longer closing on its own after I found a fix. So anyway, I mean, there's names on here that you would expect. I mean, we just said Sarkisian and James Franklin. Marcus Freeman obviously was in the championship game. Dan Lanning at Oregon, I thought he was going to win the championship. But then after those four, they've got Sherrone Moore. So here's what he has to say. He says, there are dozens of coaches with more head coaching experience who have gotten closer to winning a national championship as a head coach. But Moore has Michigan much closer to getting back to the top than some may realize. Accurate. I'm adding some, my own little commentary there. As schools and programs modernize their operation for the NIL era, we've seen a huge boost in recruiting success from some traditional powers that have had long spending power potential, but have not always directed those funds explicitly towards player acquisition. Flipping five-star quarterback Bryce Underwood from LSU is the headline that will power the positivity heading into 2025. But I think the roster quality on display at the end of the season that shows a group that really was a decent offense away from remaining in the Big Ten title race. He continues on. We'll get to that in a second, but we don't want to just have the show all about reading. I am mediocre when it comes to reading aloud. Nonetheless, I think that's accurate. I don't think it's just Bryce Underwood, though. I think it's the whole of the offense. Now, we've talked about some of the things. We talked about, yesterday or something like that? Friday? Don't remember the day. That Michigan still needs to figure out some things offensively. Obviously, wide receiver, offensive line, and I think that's kind of it, really. Quarterback, obviously, too, but they've got at least the bodies in the room. I'm not as sure about the other two, but I still think that they can win with the bodies they have. So we've talked about that. I mean, you look at the wide receivers, it's a deeper list than you would think. We'll get to that later the week as well. But where did Michigan rate in terms of total offense? After 13 games, Michigan finished 139th in the country. That is only ahead of Northwestern as far as Big Ten teams, as far as Power 5 teams, ahead of Northwestern at 130 and Florida State at 132. If you want to compare that to what we normally think of as Iowa 2023 had the dead last offense, 133. Iowa 2022 had the 130th out of 131 teams. So, and then you look at where Michigan was, and this is why I'm kind of like, okay, they can get back there. I understand there's things that have changed, but at the same time, the offensive coordinator is the head coach. So that does play a little bit of a role. Michigan was thought to have a really good offense in 2022, and still it wasn't like a top offense. It was 24th, so that's pretty good. 2023, they win the national championship with a middling offense, 69th in the country. That's just below the halfway mark, right? Because there were 133 teams, so you figure about 66-ish, 67 teams. Michigan's just below the mean when it comes to that. So I think that they are on the right track in terms of I shouldn't say they're on the right track, but we know that they're not that far removed. And Chip Lindsey, what he's been able to do, that's kind of proven a lot of things here. You look at where North Carolina was last year. Let's see if I can do this real quick. I can. North Carolina was 48th last year. with 2,370 yards rushing and 17 yards passing. If Michigan gets that type of production, then it a total of 5.95 yards per. They're going to be in the mix because, again, you look at what they were this last year. They had almost 2,000 less offensive yards and were a full yard and a half less in yards per play. So Michigan absolutely can get there as far as that's concerned. And I think that by virtue of having different quarterbacks and just a different identity, a different idea of what they're going to do, I think that's going to help out immensely. All right, so let's continue on with what Chip Patterson had to say about Sherrone Moore. He said, Michigan finished the year without some of its key playmakers on defense, yet also finished the year with wins against Ohio State and Alabama, breaking the Buckeyes' hearts in Columbus. Don't let them ever tell you otherwise. And then stifling Jalen Milroe and the Crimson Tide in the bowl game. The Wolverines lost 13 NFL draft picks off of last year's team and were dealing with injury issues throughout the season, yet the defense still held 5 of their final 6 opponents under 21 points, including those 13-10 and 19-13 wins against Ohio State and Alabama, respectively, at the end of the season. So, and he continues, what we're saying is there's reason to believe that the foundation of this roster is still solid, and the need for an offensive spark may be addressed by the arrival of a quarterback talent who has program-changing potential. That's a team that should not be overlooked for playoff contention the next couple of years, and a coach who could very well win his first title as a head coach, at least, even before some coaches with more experience on the resume. Some of the other coaches that are listed are Brian Kelly, Kalen DeBoer. Obviously, DeBoer and Kelly have both been in the championship game, but haven't actually gotten that far. Although Kelly's championship game appearance, I believe, came before the college football playoff, so it was eons ago. I like this idea. Now, I think there should be mention of Chip Lindsey, and he touches on the defense. If Michigan's able to keep Wake Martindale, like we've talked about, that goes a huge, long way in order to being able to do exactly this. That's what they absolutely are going to need to be able to have, right? Like, I think if you replace Wink Martindale, it might be another season like what we just kind of saw, where it's kind of like, oh, okay, they're trying to figure some things out, and then maybe by the end of the year, everything will be good. But at the same time, you don't want that. You want to hit the ground running because your schedule is a little bit more front loaded, but with Oklahoma and Nebraska in weeks 2 and 4. And then you get to week 14 and you got Ohio State. So I think that you want to try to be able to get through that part. And obviously, beating Ohio State goes a long way. But and obviously, if you split Oklahoma and Nebraska, that's not the end of the world anymore. You could actually lose probably both of them. If you beat Ohio State, you're in good shape. But I think that you need to probably be with what the schedule is, barring some of these teams turning out to be this past year's Indiana. I think you need you need more wins than not, right? Like, I don't think you have a giant room for error. I don't think you can afford to be a 2-loss team if you're Michigan with what the schedule is right now. I don't think, but maybe it's different. Eye test kind of changes things in a lot of ways. All right. So with that in mind, ESPN has an interesting postseason scenario that I want to get to. We will talk about that here in just a moment. But before we do, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's just icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet $5, just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of the Super Bowl 59. Did I not say that I am a poor reader when it comes to reading aloud? Plus, it's probably it's one thing if I know if I'm reading for like 30 people in a class, right? Another thing when I know I'm reading to like literally thousands of you, anywhere between like 8,000 and 35,000, 40,000 an episode. This episode won't get 40,000, but you never know. So yeah, the reading, not always great. All right. ESPN resident advanced stats guru, as I like to call him, Bill Connolly, put out his way too early 12-team projection for the college football playoff. And I think even though it does not have Michigan winning the whole shebang, I think it's something that people will like. I will get to all of it here in just a moment. No, I don't mean it that way. Let me click out of my own article and go to his, because I think that there's something here that's worth saying. So let's get to the Big Ten champion. He does not expect Michigan to be the Big Ten champion. However, he does expect Michigan to be in the Big Ten championship game. Now, I don't know about this, right? But let's read a little bit of what he had to say. Not all of it, but some of it. I think you're going to like it right off the bat. The rule: it will be won by the best team not named Ohio State, since the Buckeyes will lose to Michigan for a 5th straight year. Does that have you salivating already? Sorry, Buckeyes, I don't make the rules here. Well, I guess I do, but we're going to go with this anyway. Technically, the best team not named Ohio State has won 4 straight Big Ten titles, and I don't pick against a streak. So that's good. I think that's at this point, I'm not going to pick against Michigan, even if now it's like we're at a point with Michigan, Ohio State, that Ohio State can have a world beater. I mean, that's what it ended up being. And like a Michigan team can limp in with just like the most inability that we all went into that Michigan Ohio State game. Like if you were deluding yourself, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but you're deluding yourself if you went into the Michigan Ohio State game thinking anything other than Michigan was going to get absolutely destroyed. The only caveat there is if you followed the narrow path, which is what we talked about on this show, and which is what happened. So Bill Connolly says this: the winner, Penn State. For grins, we'll say it's Drew Aller and Penn State against Bryce Underwood and Michigan. So I'll believe it when I see it. James Franklin tends to not win those types of games. I think that it is a coup to have Jim Knowles there. Michigan's somewhat figured out how to beat Jim Knowles, right? I don't know. I think that Penn State, I think they've got a lot coming back. I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to Penn State. But let's get to the rest of the playoff, because I think that that's an interesting thing here. So at-large bids, he has Ohio State making an at-large bid as number 9. Where does he have Michigan after losing the Big Ten championship? Well, he has them at number 8. Talking about Michigan, he says, let's see. The conference with the best 2024 postseason probably deserves a 3rd bid, and because I need to pick at least one team ranked lower than on Schlabach, as in Lark Schlabach's list, I already randomly stuck Michigan, number 21, in the overall rankings in the Big Ten championship game for some reason. Hello, Wolverines. But that's inconsequential. He has Michigan as the number 8 seed, regardless, against the number 9 seed Ohio State. Well, now, what does that mean? That means Ohio State, a couple weeks after losing in Bill Connolly's projection to Michigan, the 5th straight loss. He has Michigan hosting Ohio State just a couple weeks later, again in Ann Arbor. And man, they would want revenge. And he says, what was I supposed to do? Not set up the angstiest first round matchup to date? I mean, that's what it would be. And then he says, first round, until proven otherwise, I'm going to assume that playoff home field advantage remains the most powerful substance in college football history and select all the home teams. That means he has Michigan winning not only the 5th game in a row against Ohio State, but also the 6th. Now, listen, that's going to be difficult. But as we talked about yesterday, Ohio State's lost a ton of talent. They still got a ton of talent, right? They still got Jeremiah Smith. They got 3 guys on the defense: Sonny Styles, Davison Igbinosun, aka the Grab Master. I don't have a good nickname for him, but he's grabby, obviously, right? And Caleb Downs, who's one of the best defensive players in football, certainly probably the best defensive back in football, not named Rod Moore, of course. And, you got, some of these, I don't know what the offensive line's going to look like. You got Jeremiah Smith. You're bringing in Max Clare if you're Ohio State. They're trying to bolster some things. They've got, obviously, receivers, 5-star receivers. Julian Sainz probably going to be the starter. Hard to tell, what that's going to be, because we've seen what it looks like when the next 5-star doesn't end up being a world beater, which was Kyle McCord last year. So at this point, it's kind of like, if a bad Michigan team, which is kind of what this was, I guess a substandard Michigan team can go into Columbus and beat Ohio State with the defense it has, I could see it happening. I can tell you this. I will tell you that I talked to multiple Michigan coaches in 2022 after the Big Ten championship game. they wanted Ohio State. Whether it was in the first round of the playoff or in the championship game, they wanted Ohio State again. They did not, as much as other people out there were like, it was a fluke and all of this stuff, right? Like, oh, they managed to do, but they played 10 times. Michigan probably only wins 2. No, Michigan did not believe that. They believed that they had Ohio State's number. I think they still have Ohio State's number. It'll be interesting. They've got some questions to answer, of course, as well. However, he does have, Connolly does have Georgia, who's his number 1 team, beating Michigan in the Sugar Bowl. I'd love to go to the Sugar Bowl. I want to go to New Orleans. Never been there. And then he has Georgia beating Alabama, Penn State beating Utah, and then the final being Penn State National Championship. It's a little bit of a cheeky article, right? Like, this isn't just straight advanced stats from their advanced stats guru. But because he is the advanced stats guru, because he was high on Michigan when other teams weren't, I'm going to go ahead and say that this dude knows ball. He knows what he's talking about. He's right with it. All right, let's get to 2 other quick things. We're literally just kind of going through the 4 things I wrote. And then I'm going to get back to the spaghetti that I'm currently making. That's my priority for the day. So we will get to the other 2 things that I want to talk about. We'll do so here in just a moment. Before we do, this is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, so Michigan's still trying to hit the transfer portal. I was thinking about writing an article of like Michigan transfer portal targets. There's really 2 at this point. I mean, sure, there could be others. I mean, as far as like what's like public facing at this point, there's 2. It's both of the Notre Dame guys, Rocco, Spindler, Pat Coogan. Obviously, I feel like despite Greg Crippen really coming on last year, Michigan's going to try to go for the upgrade at center. And I would not be surprised if they're able to get Rocco Spindler. Now, the thing is they took Lawrence Tatar. I don't think that Brady Norton's necessarily, I think he's more of a next year thing rather than this year. But you've got Joe Hottie coming back. Michigan's just going to be like, we want the best 5. They're going to take as many guys as they can and say, we want the best 5. That's how that's going to work. And obviously we've seen this year, and by the way, I'm just mending my broken rib here. Obviously they're going to do as much as they can to get some of these guys in. Now, Rocco Spindler, if you recall, Michigan finished 2nd. He opted to honor his departed grandfather and go to Notre Dame, but Michigan was in the thick of it. I had so many pictures, so many interviews, all these things of Rocco, Mark Spindler's son, who went to Clarkston High School. This is from Steve Wiltfong. A visit to Michigan this upcoming weekend remains a real possibility, sources tell on 3 Steel Wiltfong and me, so that's Pete Nakos, I believe. Spindler's camp and Michigan have been working through NIL negotiations ahead of a visit to Ann Arbor, according to Wiltfong, but they're also battling Indiana and Nebraska. I think like you need to get him ahead of Nebraska, who's been loading up, and it's been kind of annoying, right? I think that's probably key to try to be able to keep him away from Nebraska at this point. But the other thing is Pat Coogan, the center, who I think like is a big upgrade on Greg Crippen. Now, you hate to take away from Greg Crippen, but like we've seen, like Michigan, they tend to need like 8 guys. Some of it's due to injury, some of it's due to package. You figure out what you can do to kind of get everything kind of working all in the same place. Now, if you get Lawrence Tatar and Rocco Spindler, and then you also still have Giovanni El-Hadi, and you still have other people waiting in the wings, and Nathan Afobe out there, plenty of other guys that you would think like, okay, they could have their opportunity. I mean, they're kind of loading up in the way that they kind of were, right? Because they had Raheem Anderson, they had Andrew Gentry, they had some of these other guys, and they didn't end up sticking. So load it up, do whatever you can. Last thing, and we'll keep this a shorter show. Just the brevity is probably good still as I recover. JJ McCarthy. Like I said, we're touching everything I wrote. I've talked about some of his philanthropy before, and I shared something with you before, and I'm going to share it again. But this comes on the heels of it was shared through Minnesota Vikings pipelines of some sort that JJ went to OG Zaza and purchased like I don't know, like 15-ish pizzas so that he could take them and give them to homeless people. That tells you his heart so much. Like the Minnesota fans and all the people that are seeing that now, that like they're like, okay, they see it, right? And like they're seeing it. Some of it are seeing it for the first time. But that's just who this dude is. I've said before, as like Spartan and Buckeye fans like to like hate on JJ and like to hate on him for all these things. And I've said for a long time, they hate on him, but if they were in trouble, he would give you his shirt off of his back to help them. Those who hate him, he would do it in a heartbeat. He is that genuine of a guy. He is that humble of a guy too. There's not a part of him. There's a part of him that's a competitor, right? It's like when he told me that he had the, where he ranked in quarterbacks going into the 2023 season. You know, he was like the 7th or 8th quarterback on the list. He had that on his phone as his background, right? Like he told me that directly. He is a competitor, but he is also very humble, right? Like, I'm going to continue to share behind the scenes stories here. So like Clayton Safey and I, we were on the field before the 2022 the 2022 Indiana game. And JJ went to go up in the stands for whatever reason. Keep in mind, there's no one in the stands yet. Like the team, only Michigan's arrived. Indiana hasn't arrived. They haven't opened the gates, any of that. So only people that are milling around are either stadium staff, media, or Michigan football. That's it at that point. And the security person wouldn't let JJ back on. He very well could have gone up and be like, don't you know who I am? I mean, he's wearing his warm up. It just has 9, it doesn't say McCarthy and whatever. It doesn't, it's, you know, whatever. He could have pulled a, don't you know who I am? Didn't do it. We got up there and he happened to just get through, and he was just very like, oh no, hey, I'm JJ McCarthy. I'm the starting quarterback for Michigan. Please let me onto the field, please. You know, but then you also have the element of, this is both JJ and Donovan. But like, you know, we have a fundraiser through church. It's I think technically it's outside of church, but our church helps. And it's Blaze for the Holidays. And I participated in it where it's like you raise money to eat all kinds of blazing wings. And it was all to benefit Prism Project, which houses girls who are victim of sex trafficking. Okay. And so they have this at Buffalo Wild Wings in Fenton. Donovan Edwards and JJ were both supposed to come, but JJ was not feeling well. Donovan still came, glad-handed all kinds of people. My the next gen pastor at my church and good friend JD Wiegand was starstruck and over the moon meeting Donovan. And Donovan donated a fair share of money. But JJ, unable to make it, was like, hey, like, you know, what's the donation and everything? I still want to help. And granted, it was a mixture of the two, but like JJ like more than doubled what Donovan gave. And as a result, I was considered to be the biggest fundraiser for the thing. I didn't do anything except for just try to get JJ and Donovan. And then they, out of the kindness of their hearts, used their NIL money to give back. But that just goes to show you exactly who JJ McCarthy is. And I just want to, you know, like, he doesn't need to go out there and say anything, right? But I'm going to say it for him. Yeah, because he's that kind of dude. The whole McCarthy family is phenomenal. I love Jim McCarthy, and they're just absolutely great people, and it's just wonderful to see. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We will be back Wednesday either talking about the news that is, or we will get back to our position previews and outlook. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.